Okay, so let's kickstart the session. Right, so for those of you guys who just joined us, right, today's focus is mainly on looking at breakout trading, right? So looking at price action. So price action, we are looking at supply demand areas and more importantly on market structures, right? So for those of you guys who attended the earlier sessions, right, our previous sessions, we covered quite a bit on market structure, right? So I'll just go through in details as to how we can actually apply this across different time frames. Okay, so just a quick introduction of myself first, right? So I'm Lee Sing. You can also find me on LinkedIn, right? So if you have any questions when you're watching a recording of this, right, please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. So just a quick disclaimer, the information presented here is not to be treated as investment advice. It's for educational purposes only. So this is the agenda that we will be covering for today, right? So first we will be taking a look at market structure. So we'll cover the basics of market structure, following which we will be taking a look at how we can combine market structure with supply demand areas, right? So I'll cover a little bit more on that. But the key point of this, right, is really to understand how when you're on different time frames, right, what's the general direction of the trend and also any potential pullbacks, right, or change in market structure on the lower time frame, right, where's a target that you can consider. So those are things that are important, right? So it really boils down back to your whole entry, stop loss, and take profit target, right? Entry is potential areas where we can see the reaction, right, once the lower time frame starts consolidating. And of course, target wise would usually be if you're in an uptrend, right? It will be the high that caused the pullback. So if we're in an uptrend, prices forming higher lows and higher highs, when price starts pushing into a potential demand area, right? Target is this high that caused the pullback. Likewise, in a downtrend, right, in a bearish market, you can see that when price does a pullback, this low that caused the pullback is usually a potential target. And following with that, we will be taking a look at supply and demand areas as well. Right, so that's the other thing to look at, right? So supply demand zones can come in various forms, right? So the simpler ones, right, would usually be the ones that cause the break in market structure. So for example, if price starts forming clear higher lows and higher highs, right, when this is seen on the higher time frames, usually this translates to just bullish candles, right? So price forming clear higher lows and higher highs. So if price breaks above the previous high or the structure, right, then it serves as a potential demand. So that's one. So, and of course, following that, we will be taking a look at our setups examples. So that's what we will be covering for today. Right now, let's take a look at market structure first, right, for a start, before we hop on to the examples. So if you take a look at market structure, right, again, these are the basics of market structure. It's very simple, but at the same time, it's very helpful in terms of how you can actually put them across the different time frames to come out with the analysis, right? So just bear with me on this, right? So this is for the benefit of those who are not familiar with market structures. So in general, there are three types of market structures, right? We're looking at uptrend, downtrend, as well as a ranging market. So when prices are in an uptrend, you can see price forming clear higher lows and higher highs. You can see here, right? So successive higher lows and higher highs. And one characteristics of an uptrend, right, which can be useful for our setup is that you see that when price starts breaking above the last high and it did a pullback back into the demand zone, you can see usually on the lower time frame, we will first observe consolidation around this area. So notice that when price starts pushing into these zones, right, this whole leg that caused the pullback would be on the lower time frame. It's basically a bearish market structure. Now, we wouldn't know at which point would it be the reversal, right? Price could come into this zone before the reversal. It could go higher or even push much lower, right? Sweeping this low altogether. There's a potential for that as well. But in general, right, when price starts doing the reversal, coming into a higher time frame demand, you'll see that reversal first happen on the lower time frame. So that's the general idea, right? So that's for uptrends. And the other thing to note is that when price starts coming into these zones, right, and you're observing the reversal on the lower time frames, this pullback itself, this whole high that creates the target, right, this creates a take profit target for us. Of course, in the most ideal scenario, in an uptrend, you can see that price went way beyond it. But in general, when price starts coming into this zone, right, beyond that, you want to start protecting or trailing the position more aggressively. So that's for an uptrend. And this is an example of how it looks like in an uptrend. You can see clear higher lows and higher highs. Price pushes back into a potential support area or demand zone, right? Before we see that reversal, usually that reversal can be observed on the lower time frame. And following that, you can see that when it broke above the last high, right, this is the whole leg that we have that's bullish. If price does a pullback at this zone, right, it can be into a support area or a demand area, right? These zones are potential for entries. Okay, so with that, let's take a look at our next slide, right? So on the next slide, we are covering on bearish market structure. So this is in a downtrend. So again, in this, you can see that prices are forming clear lower lows and lower highs. And the assumption is that as long as price holds in a downtrend, right, this is likely to continue. What this means is that any pullback into a potential resistance area or a supply zone, right, we're looking for potential reversals targeting this low here. Okay, so that's what we have right on the lower time frame. And on the lower time frame, right, you can see that if price does a pullback into a supply region again, right, we're not seeing a straight move. You can see that this area pushing to this zone, right, you want to wait for consolidation around this zone. Again, if I to just narrow down this move, you can see clear higher lows and higher highs. So if price does respect this as a resistance area, we will first see that reversal happen on the lower time frame, right, to show that there's an indication of a change in market structure. We are in line with the higher time frames direction. Right, the reason it's important to wait for the consolidation is because if not, right, price could just whip right through it, breaking the zone altogether. Okay, so in a downtrend, this is an example of how it looks like. You can see price forming clear lower lows and lower highs to the downside, price pushing back into a potential resistance area. Usually this move, it's accompanied by consolidation in the market, right? So price consolidates, it breaks structure. So if you take a look at just the most recent move here, you can see clear again, higher lows, higher highs, price broke and close to the downside. Following the break and close to the downside, it pulls back in as a supply, right, before it continues much lower. Okay, now the next one that I want to cover, it's on a ranging market. So this is slightly trickier. So if you take a look at ranging markets, right, there are two things to take away from this, right? One, it's of course, so understanding the whole thing on liquidity, right? So in a ranging market, you observe support resistance level. There's this floor that price traded within before it bounces off. And again, the ceiling, right, before we saw that rejection. And multiple times, right, during these zones, you can see that when price starts coming into this region, we have usually price in coming into this zone, right, you have sell orders and stop losses lying slightly above it. That's one. And the other, it's that you have buy stops that are lying slightly above the zones. So this would come in a form of buy side liquidity. Essentially, what it means is that above a resistance area, you have some buy orders that are lying over here, right? It comes in the forms of stop losses for your sell orders or your buy orders, right? Your buy stops waiting for that strong break to the upside. And the converse is true, right? If price comes into a support level, right, you see that if people start buying at the support zones, right, they'll put their stop losses, which are essentially sell orders, slightly below the zones, or sell stops, right, waiting for price to push strongly to the downside, especially when triggered by a news event, right? So these are sell side liquidity. Now, how we can think of this is that when you're in a bullish market, you can see that you have clear higher lows and higher highs, and this comes in as a target. When you're in a ranging market, right, what differs is that when price starts coming into this zone, so assuming that it comes into a support region over here, right, and it sweeps below this region. So if price starts coming into this zone, and on your lower time frame, you're seeing that change in market structure, so lower lows and lower highs, and that change in structure, then what this shows you is that this high itself, right, can be a potential target. So it's basically trading within the range unless there's a clear break either to the up or downside. Okay, so that's one thing to note. The other thing to note is that you can see that this ranges, right? So one question you might want to ask yourself is that if I want to wait for a breakout of this range, right, this range itself can also serve as a support or a demand or supply zone, right? The reason for that is because you can see that this range, if we're to put it on a higher time frame, right, this essentially translates to a doji. Why? Because you can see that you have the open and close prices relatively near one another, right? What this shows is just a struggle for direction. And your high and low, it's essentially your support and resistance level. So don't take my word for it, right? If you take a look at specific range on a lower time frame, let's say prices are trading within a specific range on the 4 hours, 1 hour, right? You have multiple candles coming in, right? Respecting both the support and resistance level. You hop onto the higher time frame, you can see that this is actually usually, right, can be represented by a doji. Now, how do we trade this in terms of a breakout? We see that when price breaks strongly to the upside, and more importantly, closes to the upside, right, then this area serves as a potential demand. Okay, so with that, we'll take a look at a few examples. Right, so let me just hop on to the chart and we'll take a look at that. right? And at the same time, if you guys have any other requests, just put it under the questions tab. Now let's take a look at ranges in general. So let's see this example. Right, let me see if I have it on euro dollar. Okay, so let's see here. I hope you can see my screen, right? For those of you guys who are looking at this. Okay, so let's take a look at where we are right now. So if you take a look at euro dollar, for example, right? If I were to just move to the weekly time frame, or before that, right? Let me just explain a bit more on this. So you can see that on euro dollar, right? We have this whole move where prices are coming into the zone, right? So just in terms of market structure first, even if I were to put these levels in close, you can see clear higher lows and higher highs pushing into this area. And the last move that we have, right, it's essentially this low that caused the pullback. You can see that price pushed up into the resistance area, which is this high that we have over here, right? But it did not actually close above it. If I switch it back to candles, you can see that it wicked above it, right? The high went beyond that, but on the monthly time frame, price did not actually close above this zone. So this low that caused that pullback, right? So essentially, this is a range. So you have an uptrend, price forming higher lows and higher highs. And then within this range itself, or this zone itself, where prices were consolidating, right? You're seeing that range where price respected both a support resistance level. At this point, when price fails to close above it, on the monthly, so after this candle's close, you can see that if you move down to the lower time frame, right, prices are in a bearish market structure. It's doing it a pullback, right, on this zone, this whole area. So again, you see clear lower lows and lower highs. This whole leg itself, if I move down to the daily, weekly, you can see, right, very clear structure here, lower lows and lower highs to the downside. Now, if I were to move back to the monthly, you can see on the monthly, right, this area, this was the last low that caused that pullback. Price did not break above this zone, right? So this area, this low itself, when we're in a bullish structure, we see that the highs are constantly holding. Sorry, the lows are constantly holding, right? And the highs are being broken. But the converse is true if price starts consolidating. You can see that if this low did not actually break above the last high, right, then we could see a potential pullback coming into this low. So this is where we are right now. So you can see that price came in, right, wick below it. But what I really want to highlight here is to understand that when price fail to break above the zone, right, it fails to break and close above this region, this whole pullback area, right, is a bearish market structure. Depending on which time frame you are, you can see that regardless of whether you're on the daily 4 hours, right, understanding that on the monthly time frame, you have a target here. And this target on the lower time frame really comes from this point where price starts turning bearish. Right? So it can be on the higher time frames, right? If you're on your weekly or daily, you can see bearish structure, lower lows, lower highs to the downside. But we might not take the immediate reversal, but at this point where structure starts forming clearer, you can see this zone, right? So price did a pullback and you have this high. So price moved to the downside, did a pullback, right? And it just continued much lower, pushing into a resistance area. So this was where we were, right? And that's on the daily time frame. Now, if we move down to the 4 hours time frame, right, what I really want to highlight is the doji, right? So let's take a look at it again, right, on the lower time frame. So you can see that when price starts coming into this zone, right, be it on the weekly or the daily, you can see this region, right, where we have a doji. So for those of you guys who are not familiar with doji, right, essentially it's an area where you can see the open and close prices relatively near one another, and you have a high and low. Now, if I were to just narrow our focus to this doji on the daily or even the 4 hours, you can see that this doji, right, that was circled, it's essentially a range. You see a range that price traded within, right, for multiple days before it actually broke and closed to the upside. So that's one. Right, then the other thing to note with this is that you can see that when price starts coming into this zone over here, right, when it breaks and close to the upside, this region, right, when price starts visiting this zone here, which is essentially the doji on your weekly time frame, it's also the low, right, so this area. So you can see that when price starts coming into this zone, right? Sometimes, right, in the ideal scenario, right, we see that reaction of this region, or sometimes it just goes much higher, but often, right, price could just wick below it. So when price starts pushing into this zone, right, on your lower time frame, it has to first be observed, right? Price needs to be breaking structure. So you see that this whole region, right, this whole leg pushing into the demand area that we have, or the doji on the weekly, right, it's still bearish. If you take a look at it in close, if you take a look at it on the daily time frame or even the 4 hours time frame, you can see that this is still bearish, right? We're seeing price respecting this zone on the daily, right? And right now, where you are seeing what you're seeing over here on the daily is that price came in, right? It's currently sitting on the daily region, came in, it swept the low previously, right? So depending on how this day close, whether it closes above it, right? So that's where we are right now on the daily. So if you take a look at the daily, just the most recent price action, right? We're forming a potential double bottom here. But again, right, for those of you guys who looked at chart patterns, a double bottom is not confirmed until there's a break of the neckline. So if you take a look at this region, right, this is really the area that caused the previous pullback, right? So unless price breaks and close above this, right, the double bottom is not confirmed. Right, so we covered on chart patterns in one of the earlier sessions, and we talk about how it's important that prices are in if there's a change of market direction, right, it has to be first reflected on the lower time frames. Okay, so this it's on the daily, right, which means that as long as price breaks and close above this, right, daily turns bullish. But until then, right, you can see that this is where prices are currently hovering around. Now, if you move down to the 4 hours time frame, you can see that the same thing on the 4 hours, right? So we could see a potential pullback into this zone, right? So on the daily, on the 4 hours, you can see this area. So this whole spike that we're seeing on the daily time frame, right? If you're on the lower time frame, it's again characterized by higher lows and higher highs. So this is where we are right now, right? So on the daily, right, I'll wait for a break and close of this move, right? If price breaks and close above this, it creates a potential target. At this point in time, right, this is really the last high that we have. But on the daily, you can see that it's still consolidating. Right, so this is the last high that you can target on the daily, which caused the pullback. If we move down to the lower time frame, on the lower time frame, right, 4 hours or even on the 1 hour, you can see that this zone that we have, right, this is a potential demand region here. So price came in, swept the previous low, right? There's a potential demand on this zone. If price breaks and close above it, right, it does a pullback into this area, right? This is a potential region. But as always, right, if price starts coming into this zone, understand that on the higher time frame, right, on the daily, the weekly, right, it's still showing bearish structure. So prices are still forming lower lows and lower highs coming into this region, right? So depending on how this week closed, right, this area here, right, we could be seeing that consolidation before a pullback, right? But that has to be first reflected on the lower time frame. So if we take a look at it on the 4 hours, right, if price comes into this zone, right, revisits this region here, this area. If price comes into this region, again, right, that pullback would be characterized by bearish structure. So if price pushes back into this area, right, the high that caused the pullback will be a potential target. That's one, right? And we're looking for reversal of market structure when price comes into this demand zone. So this is an example, but more importantly, it's really to illustrate the use of the dojis, right? So if you take a look at it on the weekly, you can see that this is a potential demand zone. It doesn't mean that we're taking any immediate entries. And usually this demand zone, right, if it's accompanied with a strong bullish break to the upside, a break and close to the upside here, you can see that this itself, right, would be serve as a demand. So if you take a look at breakout trades, right, usually we're waiting for price to trade respecting both the resistance and support area, and then following by a strong break and close either to the up or downside. Okay, so I have a few questions, right? I just saw the stream, sorry for that, right? So can you do gold? So no, can you do silver? So yes, let's take a look at silver. Right, good day to you as well, Jimilu. Right, so yes, and we have another request for gold via Zoom. So yes, we'll take a look at that as well. So gold and silver, right? Let's see, are we trading this live? Right, so this is a live analysis, but no, this is the educational series for today. We're usually covering, what we're covering for today, it's mainly on how we can combine market structure and price action. Okay, so this is more for breakout trades. Right, so if you guys have any other questions, right, do keep them coming. Okay, so let's take a look at silver and gold. So on the monthly time frame first, right? If you take a look at it on the monthly, this is where we are right now, right? You can see that price came in to this zone, excuse me. So price came into this zone, right, on the monthly, right, and this area here, we have a low. So imagine this, right, price came in, we're seeing a break and then a rejection of the zone. So this as a potential support region. That's one, right? And the other, of course, we have a potential ascending trend line here. So you can see this zone. I'm not sure if it serves as a channel. Let's see, right? So yeah, there's a potential ascending channel, essentially an area where price tests as both a support and resistance zone. So that's where we are on the monthly, right? So this is one region. If you take a look at it on the weekly time frame, right? On the weekly, there isn't much that we can see. You can see essentially prices were consolidating around this area, right? You're seeing this descending trend line that's being respected here as well. Okay, so that's on the weekly time frame, not much here. Now, if you move down to the daily time frame, on the daily time frame, right? So you can see this whole area, right? Prices are just consolidating. It's neither breaking the highs or the lows. So this whole structure that we're seeing here, you can see that price consolidated here. And all this, right? So you have the last high, price broke to the downside, and then subsequently this zone as well, this area, right? So price broke. We have the high here, right, and then the low, and then this high, right, came in, right, probably respected some resistance area here, did a pullback, right, back into the low, and you're seeing this move. So squeeze here. Right, now if you take a look at it on the daily, right, there isn't much that we can see on the daily, right, apart from this, right? So on the daily time frame, what we have currently, you can see that it's the last region. Sorry, just before that, right, let me go to the weekly. So if you take a look at the weekly, you can see that this whole zone that caused the pullback, right, or the descending trend line, right, we try and highlight potential resistance areas. So one would be this region where we saw the rejection previously. So that's one. So you can see this zone. So you can see the price came in to this area, right? Respected this. We saw a pullback, but it did not actually break to the downside, right? So this is where we are right now. So these are just potential zones on the higher time frame. If you look at it on the daily time frame, right? On the daily, we have this consolidation over here, right? At this point, you can see that price came in, right? Again, it broke structure. So lower lows, lower highs to the downside. This whole move to the downside, right? It's in a bearish market structure. If you see it on the daily, you see it on the 4 hours, right? Pretty much the same things. So you can see that price came in, right? Broke and closed to the downside, right? So this is a potential area to watch, this zone here on the daily time frame. Okay, so this is where we are right now. Honestly, I don't think the setup is the clearest, but yeah, that's where we are now. If I to narrow down this move, right, down on the 4 hours or 1 hour time frame, you can see that this demand area that we narrowed the region to, right, this whole move that we have, right, you can see that when price either on the 4 hours or 1 hour, right, you can see that this area can be narrowed down to this move here. And so essentially what we have, price forming bearish structure, right? And then we see a break to the upside, right? So if you move down to the lower time frame, you can see here, right? Very clear lower lows and lower highs. And then following that, price broke and closed to the upside. So if we're to narrow down this whole daily move, right, down to the lower time frame, right, this is a potential region to watch. So this area here, right? So if price comes into this zone, right, that's a potential region to watch. Where we are right now, if you take a look at it either on the 4 hours or 1 hour, right, there isn't much, right? Especially on the 4 hours time frame, you can see that prices are still consolidating around this zone, right? So if we do see a deeper pullback, right, this is a potential area to watch, right? If this pullback forms, it also causes this high that caused the pullback, right, can be a potential target. So that's for the 4 hours. Right, so the potential zone that I'll be looking at, right, is really this zone over here, right? So if price comes into this area during the New York session, right, it's a potential region. If you look at it on the daily or 4 hours, there's really not much setups at the moment, right? So yeah, this region, right? So that's silver for me right now, right? So that's one. Right now, let's take a look at another setup. Right, so on gold. So let's take a look at gold. Okay, so you saw gold yesterday, right? So this region, right? So price came in, tested the zone, the demand area. So this was gold, I believe, yesterday when we did the analysis, right? So you can see the price came in, right? We came into a support region here previously. Price came in, tapped into the zone. We moved down to the lower time frame, right? So this was the support area that we've highlighted. You can see price break and close to the upside. We tested this zone as a support region, right? This is the target on the H4. Why? Because this is the H4, the high that caused the pullback. So you can see this zone, right? So this is the target. So again, when we talk about bullish market structure, when this high caused the pullback, right, this is a potential target. So any long positions targeting this, right? Of course, in this example, price went beyond it, but the move down was equally fast, right? So beyond that, you want to start protecting the positions more aggressively. If you move down to the lower time frame on gold, this was the area that we highlighted, right? So I believe on the 5 minutes here, right? So yesterday, this region, you can see on gold, right? Again, price broke structure to the upside. So when price comes into a higher time frame demand, this area here, right? You can see that what happened. Again, we have lower lows and lower highs pushing down to this move. Price then broke and closed to the upside. We tested this demand area, right? So this demand area was highlighted, taking this candle here, the extreme of this move, right? So this zone over here. Right, you can see the price came into it, right? So depending on where you put the stop loss, right, it might be wick slightly below. Right, so that's one, or another way is to look for confirmation of this move. You can see that price on this move itself, right? When you're on the lower time frame, you can move down to the lower time frame, let's say to the 1 minute time frame. Let's see if there are any potential entries here. So at this point, you can see again, right? Price came into this region. Okay, so this is clear. Price came in the first time over here. It wicked slightly below previously, right? And then following that, there's a break and close to the upside. You can see that break and close to the upside. So the confirmation really comes in after the break and close of this candle, because this is then a rejection of the zone, right? So again, the same structure, lower lows and lower highs. You can see price pulled back, broke and close to the upside. So this, following the break and close of this candle, it validates this as a demand area on the lower time frame. So this is one, right, on the lower time frame. And the target would be, again, the 4 hours high, which is really this high that caused the pullback. Of course, beyond that, right, that's also driven by news event. But that's basically the structure. So that's where we were yesterday. Now, if you take a look at where we are right now, right, we have this weekly high that caused the pullback. You can see that this was the weekly high that caused the pullback, right? If I'm on the monthly or even the weekly time frame, this region here. So this area that we've marked out, right? Not too different from where we were previously. Right now on the weekly, right? Prices are still on this demand zone. Right, so this is still the demand area. So again, that didn't change much from the analysis yesterday. Now, when we move down to the daily time frame, right? So now that this setup is no longer valid, right? So you can see that price came in, right, hit the H4 target, went slightly beyond it, and then we're just seeing that pullback. So all these areas, right, let me just remove the lower time frame setups since these are no longer valid. And so that was yesterday's analysis. Now, if you take a look at where we are on the daily, right, we have the daily, again, still the same zone, right? The daily previous resistance turn support level, the same area you can see here as well. If I put this level in close, you can draw a horizontal line across. So that's a potential region. Again, right, it's the daily, right? This is also the area that caused the pullback. So if the lower time frame starts turning bullish, right, then there's a potential area for us to target on the daily time frame, this high that caused the pullback. If I move down to the 4 hours, you can see on the 4 hours is still bearish, right? Prices are still forming lower lows and lower highs. So 4 hours is still bearish. You could see price at least push much deeper, right? You can see the structure, right? So prices pushing into this zone, right? So this is a potential area that price could push into. Again, right? If price starts respecting this time demand area over here, right? It has to first show that change in market structure on your lower time frame. If you're on your 1 hour, 4 hours, or even the 15 minutes time frame, you can see that right now where we are, right? This whole structure is still bearish. Right, so I think we could still see a deeper pullback in gold, right? So probably it will be clearer when London session comes in, right? Where right now where we are, even this whole pullback leg, you can see that price was reacting to the previous resistance level. This region, right, was the previous support, then it failed and became the resistance zone here. And then following that, this whole pullback leg itself is bearish, right? You can see prices are in a bearish structure, it's still forming lower lows and lower highs. This whole move to the downside. Right, so this is where we are right now. I think we could still see a deeper pullback, at least targeting this low here, this region, right? Given that the higher time frame is still bearish. Okay, so that's where we are, right? Once price starts coming into this zone, right? If the lower time frame starts turning bullish, you have a high that caused a pullback. So that's a potential area for entry. But where we are right now, right, you can see on gold, right, it's the market structure is still bearish, at least with this most recent leg. You can see bearish structure here, right? Even if I have to paint out the highs and lows. Okay, so I hope that this is clear for gold. Right, so that's where we are right now, right? The daily is still on the demand zone, but again, any reversal. So there are two things, right? Price could wick slightly below it before it continues to the upside, potentially, right? Or it could just break this zone altogether and revisit this area, which is why, as much as possible, right, we need the reversal to first be shown on the lower time frame to show that it's indeed reacting to this higher time frame's demand. Because if not, right, in a downtrend, right, we know that prices are just going to continue lower lows and lower highs. Okay, now let's take a look at Euro franc. So again, on the higher time frame, you can see on the higher time frame first, right? On Euro franc, on the monthly. So monthly, we have this area here, right? You can see that this whole move to the downside, right? Just focusing on this zone. We have this move, right? You can see that prices are coming into a potential resistance area here. That's on the monthly time frame, right? So this is where we are right now on the monthly. You can see that this zone, it's a potential resistance. Why? Because price came in the first time. We see the reaction of the zone and then broke to the downside. If you put these levels in close, you can see if to just extend this, right, also saw the previous support that failed, right? So it's the support area that failed, and then we have a potential region that as a resistance, right? Of course, where we are right now, right, it's still quite far away on the monthly. If you look at it on the weekly time frame, on the weekly, you're seeing equal lows being formed here. Right, you can see the zone. So this is clear on the weekly. You can see that prices were forming this low, came in, right? 3 times actually, right? So on the lower time frame, on the weekly, daily, you can see this zone price came in, tested 3 times. Now, if I to just move back slightly, right, on the weekly time frame, you can see that on the weekly, right, we have this high. So the whole structure on the weekly, again, you're seeing lower lows and lower highs. If I put these levels in close, you can see this was the last high that caused the pullback. So depending on how this wick closed, right, if price closes beyond or rather above this zone, you can see that this is the current area, and this was the previous high that caused the pullback. So this is where we are right now on the weekly time frame. Prices are testing a potential resistance, right? So again, 2 scenarios. A price could just go right through it to test this monthly zone. That's one, or it could reverse on the lower time frame, right? So a lot of it depends on the lower time frame. But this is where we are right now on the weekly. If you move down to the daily time frame, you can see on the daily, right? So price came in, tested this high a few times, right? So one thing to note with this is that you can see that when we have this region or this consolidation, right? One thing I always ask myself is if there is a target, right? So if there's no target, right, then one way to look at it is that let's say if price pulls back into this zone, right, coming into a potential support area here, which is essentially the previous resistance. You can see it was a previous resistance that failed. If I put these levels in close, you can see this as well, right? So basically this area that price came in, tested 3 times. Now at this point, right, if price comes in into this area, this zone over here, right, you can see pushing into this zone again, you'll be forming lower lows and lower highs. So whether it's going to respect this area or not, right, you need to see it on the lower time frame, right? Now, in this case, right, you can see this zone here. So price came in, tested the high, the resistance area that we have, right? So one thing that we're looking out for is that when price came in, right, into this zone, on the higher time frame, you can see that on the weekly, right, nothing much on the weekly, is really consolidation around this area. On the monthly, as we have covered, right, we have a resistance area here. Now, if we move down to the daily time frame, right, so you can see this whole move, right, is still bullish. Prices are forming higher lows and higher highs. If you move down to the 4 hours, you can see this as well, right? It's quite clear. So prices are currently testing this zone, right? So we can see 2 scenarios, right? One is that it will just continue, given that it's still in a bullish market structure. So if you take a look at it on a 1 hour, right? 1 hour, not so much. You don't really see that. We're just seeing that consolidation around the zone now, but there's no target. Again, what I mean by this is that let's say if we do see a reversal from here, right? Price reverse from this region, it will form a new low over here, right? Trading within the range. And if the lower time frame starts turning bearish, then you know that this is a potential target you can take, right, for the short-term shots. But right now where we are here, right, either on the 4 hours, 1 hour, you can see that there's no target. Right, if you're on the 15 minutes, pretty much as well, right? There's no low that we can target if we're taking any shots. And at the same time, right, if price does pull back into this zone, this whole pullback that caused the structure, right, you can see consolidation again, and that consolidation in turn creates a target. So destination or that you can close out partials, right? So that's where we are. So on Euro franc, right, this is the region, right? This is the resistance area we're seeing on the weekly time frame, right? On the weekly, this was the high that we've covered, right? So if price breaks and close above this zone, right, I think we could see a much higher upside, at least to the monthly, but that depends on this week's close, right? So a big part of it depends on this week, given that it has hit or reached this zone, the high previously. Right now, we're just waiting for consolidation to see if prices could do a potential pullback into the daily demand area here. So that's for me on Euro franc. Right now, let's take a look at dollar yen, right? And then also on pound dollar. So if you take a look at dollar yen on the higher time frame, you can see on the higher time frame, right? If I'm on the month, oh, sorry, this is a 1 minute. On the monthly, right? On the monthly region, we have this high that prices are potentially pushing into this whole zone over here. So again, you can see that when price pushes into this resistance area, are we seeing an immediate reversal, or it could just go right through it, right? That depends on your lower time frame. When I say lower time frame, what I really mean is that this whole leg that's pushing into the zone, right? If I'm on the weekly or even the daily, you can see this whole leg is still bullish. Prices are in a bullish market structure, right? So the reversal, it's not, if we do see any reversal, right, it's not there yet, right? Given that prices are still pushing to form higher lows and higher highs. So recall in an uptrend, right, when price starts forming higher lows and higher highs, and you pull back into the zone, we can target a potential high here. So if you're on the daily time frame, right, depends on how today closed, right? But you can see that previously as well, right? Price broke structure every time it pulls back into a support and just continues much higher. If we move to the daily time frame, right, this is where we are right now on the daily, right? So we have a demand region here. There was also the previous resistance level, which failed, right? And price tested this zone. So this is where we are right now. So if we do see a pullback into this zone on the daily, right, this is a potential support region to watch. Again, right, if we do see a pullback, this pullback creates a high. At the same time, the lower time frame has to turn bullish first for this high to be a target. If we move to the 4 hours time frame, down on the 4 hours time frame, you can see this is really where we are right now, right? So prices are doing a potential pullback, right? Let's see, right? So this region, right, you need to move to the lower time frame. So if we move down to, let's say, the 1 hour structure, right? On the 1 hour time frame, there isn't much, right? You're just seeing that consolidation, and within this zone, right, if I put this levels in close, you can see higher lows and higher highs. So this is the last low that we have here, right, where price broke structure. If you see it on the 1 hour, 4 hours, pretty much the same thing, right? So we're still bullish here, right? You can see the price came in, wicked a few times, but did not actually close below it. It creates this high, this pullback, right, as a potential target. So this area here. So this is the region that we're working with now, right? If price breaks and close below, right? So I think the price could just continue into this zone, right? But if price breaks and close below this area, we could see a deeper pullback into the zone. So following the break and close of structure to the downside, right, then that's a potential for price to continue much lower. But on the higher time frame, if you're on both the 4 hours, the daily, you can see that this whole structure is still bullish, right? So any pullback itself, potential pullback, right, this region, right, as long as it comes into a demand area, right, there's still potential for more upside. Okay, so that's on the 4 hours, the 1 hour. So you can see the support region, it's really the last low that we are seeing that pullback. Okay, now let's take a look at the last setup, which is on pound dollar, right? Support analysis, right? And yeah, so let's take a look at that, right? So if you take a look at pound dollar, let me just close all of this. You have the monthly time frame just based on support analysis areas, right? We have this region. So price came in, right? You're seeing that break of structure here. Resistance support area, if I put this levels in close, you can see this as well, right? So this is a potential support region. But again, right, this area, when price starts coming into this zone, it pushes into this area that we have, right? You can see that this whole leg itself, on the monthly, on the weekly, it's bearish. You can see this very clearly, right? Lower lows and lower highs to the downside, right? So on the weekly, monthly, still bearish. If we move down to the daily time frame, daily is bearish as well, right? So very clear lower lows and lower highs to the downside, right? So pound dollar, at least on the higher time frames, we went through all these time frames, right? They're still bearish, just looking at the most recent price movement. So a big part of this is understanding that if prices are still bearish, right, any pullback itself, as long as this whole structure on the lower time frame is still bearish, if price has to start reversing and changing direction, right, you will first observe the consolidation on the lower time frames. So if you move to the daily or even the 4 hours, right? So on the 4 hours, this is where we are right now, right? So depending on how the 4 hours candle close, right? So a big part of it is dependent on this. If price closes below this region, you can see that this whole move, right? Even if I'm on the 4 hours, 1 hour, pretty much the same thing, right? But there's no target. So ideally, what we want to wait for is a potential pullback, which can form a low, right? And then that can be a target on the lower time frame. If you're on the 4 hours, 1 hour, right? Right now where we are, you can see that just this whole move, right? Prices are in a bearish structure. You can see this, right? Lower lows and lower highs. Here, you can see this, right? So price came in, you're forming this lower lows and lower highs to the downside. And so as long as price holds above this, any potential pullback into a resistance area, which is really this, right? The most immediate resistance level comes in over here. If you move down to the 1 hour, you can see this clearer, this region here, right? Price came in, you're seeing that test of this as support twice, and then filling this zone and as potential resistance. So if we do see a pullback into this zone, right, this low serves as a potential target. But right now on pound dollar, there's not much setups where we are right now. Right, so that's for me on pound dollar, right? So in terms of support resistance analysis, that's where we are. If price pushes into this zone, potential to push into this area as a resistance, right? You can again look for lower time frame reversal. So you can see that if price were to move up, if prices move up into this zone, right, you'll see again bullish structure, higher lows and higher highs, and that reversal should be seen on the lower time frame first. Okay, now let's take a look at the last setup, which is on pound Aussie, right? So that's the last setup that we will be covering for today. And so with this, let's take a look at where we are. So if you're on the monthly first, on the monthly, you have a support region over here. You can see the zone, right? So price came in, that was the previous resistance, which failed multiple times, and the price pulled back into the zone as a potential support region. Right, so that's where we are right now on the monthly. But of course, right, on the monthly, this is the pullback, and this creates a potential high on the monthly. But you can see that these levels are very far away. So we're looking at lower time frame zones. Right? So if we do see a pullback into this region, right, if price starts respecting this area on the lower time frame, you'll see that change in structure happen first. So this is on the weekly, right? On the weekly time frame, depending on how this wick close, right? This candle close, I mean. Right, so right now, potentially seeing some consolidation, but nothing much on the weekly, right? We're coming into a potential demand area, but a big part of it is still dependent on the rest. Right, now let's take a look at this region here, right? So this area on the daily time frame, you can see that again, prices are bearish. It's forming this whole move, right? Bearish to the downside. So just looking at the daily itself, you can see that this whole move that price pulls back into, it's still bearish, right? So if I take a look at it on the daily, on the 4 hours, you probably see this clearer on the 4 hours time frame. This whole move. So it was the previous support level, failed, tested as a resistance. You can see this zone, held as a support, failed as a resistance, and this is where right now where we are here. Right, so that's on the 4 hours time frame. Right? It creates this low as a potential target, this region that caused the pullback. So that's on the 4 hours. So there's a potential resistance on the 4 hours, but again, right, now let's focus on this whole leg up. So the idea is that if prices are in a bullish structure, pushing into a resistance, right, if there's no reversal on the lower time frame, right, price could just continue much higher, breaking the zone altogether, right? So this is the pullback leg that we're focusing on. If you move down to the 1 hour time frame, you can see on the 1 hour where we are right now. Our price came into the zone. You have a resistance region here, potential pullback. Right, and you can see that this area that caused the pullback, right? If I go to the 1 hour time frame or even the 15 minutes time frame, let's see if we can see this. So you can see this whole zone that we have, right? Price came in, it wick above the high previously. And then what happens following that is that it then broke and closed to the downside. Right, so if you're on the 1 hour, even the 15 minutes, right? This is the resistance area here, right? Or the supply zone. And so this is the 1 hour supply region here. Right, so this is what prices are currently testing. You can see this zone. So if price pushes back into this region, which it's really pushing back into this zone, you can see that this whole pullback leg, right, on the 15 minutes, you're seeing again clear higher lows and higher highs. This zone, 15 minutes, 5 minutes, you're seeing pretty much the same thing, right? This region here, right? So on the lower time frames, you can see that if price pushes back into this area, it taps into this zone, right? This is where we are right now. So you can see higher lows, higher highs, and then we're just seeing that break to the downside. So price pushing back into the zone. as a potential supply, right? In fact, on the lower time frame, this is a potential supply here, right? So you can see this region, right? So for me, right, on the lower time frame, if price breaks and close below this zone, this area, this last low here, right, then there's a potential for movement to the downside. But if you're on the higher time frame, if you're on the 1 hour, you can see that this is where we are right now. So we could see a potential or move further down, right? The most immediate low that caused the pullback, excuse me, is this low here, this region, right? And of course, beyond that, there is this low on the higher time frame, which is your 4 hours that caused the pullback. Okay, so I hope that that helps in terms of the analysis for pound Aussie. You are most welcome, Bora. Right, so that's what we have for today, right? I think I've answered all of your questions. Right, so this is where we are right now on pound Aussie, right? I do think that this is a supply region, right? And on the higher time frame, you can see consolidation. So what's better? It's if there is a clearer structure, right? So ideally, you want to see clear lower lows and lower highs if prices are really pushing into this low here. Right, you're most welcome. Okay, so you're very welcome, Jamilo. Right, I'm glad that you enjoyed the session. You're very welcome, Abraham. Okay, so with that, right, that's what we have for today, right? So thanks everyone for staying with us till the end as always, right? Thanks for being such great audiences and all your questions, right? We love it when it's an interactive session, right? So do come with your questions. So for tomorrow, right, we will be doing our analysis session as well. So you can just go to vantagemarkets.com. Under education and tools, educational webinars. You can sign up for the session here, right? So those are the speakers, the sessions. For tomorrow, we are covering mainly on dollar yen. Right, so of course, not just dollar yen. If you have any other chart requests, you can feel free to type them under the questions chat here. So do join us for tomorrow's session. Right, so that will be via Zoom or you can stream in via the app as well. Okay, so with that, we've come to the end of the session, right? Thanks everyone. Have a great trading week ahead and we will catch you guys again tomorrow.